Welcome to the Fesh stream. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll get into it.
I am Jake the Pog. I am a fan of movies.
I am Gay Fesh, and I'm also a fan of movies. So I set the stage a little bit. Actually, I need to let me bring down the game audio for myself because I am playing Mario Odyssey while we're talking here, but it's a little loud on my end. So audio, it's always fun to deal with. There. Now it's on my end. Okay. Yeah, so as I explained as I started stream, but I figure more people have gotten here since I got here, I tweeted the other day the blue checks sticking, pointing swords at you for an opinion, and my opinion was Zack Snyder does not understand Batman or Superman. And then you quote tweeted me saying that this is the problem with being a lefty is that 90% of lefties have no media analysis and just regurgitate whatever their the last video essay they saw was. And I thought that was an interesting take because typically, like, the general view of like a Snyderbro is either kind of like an apolitical or like somewhat right-leaning figure, or even just like, you know, you've got your more extreme ones like geeks and gamers. I mean, Zack Snyder famously disavowed them, but, you know, they were on his side for a long time. So
Yeah.
I was very intrigued to see somebody specifically identify as a lefty Snyder fan, and I thought that might make for an interesting conversation.
I wouldn't introduce myself as a lefty Snyder fan. I would introduce myself as a lefty who happens to like comic book movies and happened to like Snyder's kind of like weird take.
Sure, okay. Now, to put my cards on the table here, I don't hate Zack Snyder. I think for certain things, he has a very interesting take. I really like the way that he does action in his movies when that's the point of the movie. Like, I actually really like Man of Steel. I think it has some serious problems in terms of understanding the character of Superman itself, but it's the first time that I've seen a Kryptonian fight on screen and feel like that was how it would actually look. But yeah, so just cards on the table. I think that Zack Snyder wants to treat Superman as a god when that's not really how Superman is written. You know, usually in the comics, certainly he has the powers of a god, but he has the personality of, you know, a Boy Scout from Smallville. And the way that he's portrayed in those films, and like yesterday I just went through and watched all 3 Snyder films in the DC movies, extended editions and everything. So yes, I did sit through 4 hours of a movie in which there's explicitly an Icelandic choir serenading Aquaman going into the ocean.
Yes,
but
we love that.
Yeah. What's your take on the general view of like the kind of insufferable Snyderbro, who like you've I'm sure you've run into that where people are like, Snyder Bros, please watch another movie. They look at something, they're like, oh, look at what Zack Snyder did. Nobody's done this in film before, and like everyone's done it in film before. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm gonna set your mind at ease. I believe all Snyder fans who aren't me should be melted down in a pot and thrown into a volcano.
So you're the one true Snyder bro.
I am everyone the only one. I'm the only correct Snyder fan. I see in these movies what they refuse to see. I am the only correct one.
That's good to know. I will admit that I did stalk your profile a little bit just by searching your username and Snyder to see what takes you had come up. And actually, let me check those, because there was one that I saw that
I will stand by all of them.
Well, I'm sure.
Wait.
Oh, this one really pissed me off, actually. Okay, so I'm pulling up the tweet. Actually, let me.
Oh shit! I'm in trouble.
I'm loading it up, and then I'm gonna switch my stream over so that chat can see this one. Once the page loads, because I have a dinky laptop and Twitter takes forever to load.
My ruination has come.
Yeah, here we go. Oh, and I need to mute the background music on here. Okay, so here's the tweet. Somebody, you're quote tweeting somebody who said, "Name a bigger downgrade," and it shows Jimmy Olsen from the comics, and then Jimmy Olsen from the Ultimate Edition of Batman versus Superman. Because
that
in the theatrical release, we didn't even know that it was.
Asshole.
Right, he wasn't even named in the theatrical release. He was only named in the movie. And so you quote tweeted that and said, "This is one of the most base things Snyder ever did. It's so fucking funny. Fuck anyone who pretends to care about Jimmy Olsen, bruh." And speaking as somebody who grew up reading Superman comics from my dad's collection, so he had like all of the 60s classics. Like I had the issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, where Jimmy Olsen inherits an island and throws kryptonite boulders at Superman using a catapult to keep him away. So I
right
like
now,
Jimmy Olsen.
Right now, as you're speaking, I'm looking at a gigantic volume of Jack Kirby's Fourth World Omnibus sitting on my desk.
Okay.
So I'm a huge fan of Jimmy Olsen as well, actually. And I'm only saying that because I think it's funny to annoy people just like me.
Okay, so you are just being contrarian with that tweet. Okay. That's not something that you actually...
I am being contrarian, but I am also kind of pointing out how it's really stupid to care about, like, a character that clearly doesn't impact the plot. Like, who cares who that random guy was? Like, I don't care if he uses the name Jimmy Olsen or not. Like, he's not even Jimmy Olsen anyway. You know what I mean?
Right, because he's not a photographer for the Daily Planet. He's a CIA agent who just gets killed 2 minutes after you meet him.
Yeah, how many CIA agents do you know use their real name when pretending to be a photographer? Like, no, they would use some fake name.
I mean, unless Ian Kaczynski is not his real name, we know at least one CIA asset who uses his real name.
He calls himself Whoosh, actually.
That's true. But, okay. So, okay, I guess I can see where you're coming from in with that tweet. That's good to know that you were just being contrarian. I would like to see Jimmy Olsen done right in film. And it did kind of annoy me that Zack Snyder just decided that he was going to kill off Jimmy Olsen because he didn't care about using Jimmy Olsen. If you didn't care about using Jimmy Olsen, you don't have to cast him in the movie. And I almost wonder if that's why they didn't give him the name in the theatrical release, and it was only in the Ultimate Edition that they did that.
Is there a character called Jenny? Is she meant to be like a gender swapped Jimmy Olsen, or did they not go with that?
Jenny, she was, I remember her in Man of Steel. I don't think she was a photographer. She was just kind of like, she worked in the bullpen.
She was an intern at first, wasn't she?
I guess, yeah, but yeah, like nobody remembers that. I only remember it because I literally saw it yesterday.
I remember everything.
Yeah.
The entire Snyderverse. It's a map playing in my mind. I'm trapped in here. I'm in hell.
Well, it sounds like hell, yeah. Oh, shoot. I am messing up this race here in Mario Odyssey. I don't know if you've got stream up, but okay, I got it.
What happens when you watch a movie like way too many times? Oh yeah, I've got you on stream here. Hang on.
Okay. All right. So let me check one of your other tweets then. Oh yeah, okay, I'm not going to pull this one up, I'm just going to read it. It says, Zack Snyder's Justice League is the only movie that's allowed to be 4 hours, no one else can do this shit, and you're quote tweeting something that says that Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be 3.5 hours. Is that another just contrarian opinion, or do you actually mean that?
Do I mean what? Is it going to be 3.5 hours? Is that not true?
Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, they announced that it was going to be 3.5 hours, and you said that Zack Snyder's Justice League is the only movie that should be that long.
4 hours.
4 hours, yes.
I stand by that completely.
You stand by that completely. Okay. There is no reason for that movie to be 4 hours. In fact, I noticed another tweet that you did talking about how the time code for Superman's death in Man of Steel and Superman's rebirth in Justice League is at the same time code. And my thinking is, okay, that's why we had the Icelandic chant scene in in Justice League, because we had to pad the time.
Yeah.
I feel like this isn't, this is my first stream debate, so I'm a little disorganized here, but I guess, why do you think Zack Snyder understands Superman?
Well, okay, so it's kind of a long digression.
No, let's go.
I think the discussion around Superman is like supremely fucked, because a lot of people don't view Superman as a person. A lot of people view him as like a symbol, or like almost like Superman's like a feeling, like they remember the Christopher Reeve movies, and to them it's a feeling, and if a movie doesn't give them that feeling, they point at it and go, that's not Superman, that's something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But the truth is, he's just a character, and he has to be reinterpreted endlessly, because he's kind of like a mythic figure. And just because a movie doesn't really give you that warm feeling, that doesn't necessarily mean the movie doesn't understand Superman. I think maybe if it doesn't give you that warm feeling, it might be because the movie is trying to challenge the idea of Superman that you might have, like, already in your head.
Okay, and how is Zack Snyder challenging our idea of Superman?
Well, as you say, by framing him like a god, like a mythic figure. But I don't think anything that Clark does in those movies affirms the idea that he is a god or a mythic figure. I think he is still like what does he do?
Well,
how does he act like a god?
I would say there's that whole montage in Batman vs Superman where he's going and like saving people from a flood, or capturing an exploding shuttlecraft, where everything is framed as everybody is looking up at him as a god, and him just kind of, doing like Christ T poses and just kind of, looking like stern and solemn as, he is basically accepting kind of begrudgingly this adulation.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Is that scene framing him through Clark Kent's eyes? Or is that scene framing him through the way other people choose to see him?
It's framing him through the way people are seeing him, but it also is he's not resisting it. He's kind of playing into it.
Well, what do you mean he's like not resisting it? How would he
I mean, like, when he rescues that girl and brings her to the crowd and everybody's got their arms out, and he just it like that very much evokes the idea of Jesus walking through the crowd and everybody's trying to touch his robe so that they can be healed, that kind of a thing, and he just stands there and lets them.
Well, what's he supposed to do, slap them?
He could be a little humble and be like, I'm just a dude, please.
I do think this is a problem that you fall into sometimes with visual storytelling, where it's like you can't just have characters constantly explaining things to the audience.
Correct. Which is why when you frame things in that way, when you frame Superman with deliberate Jesus iconography, and you don't have Clark challenge that at any point in the film, in fact,
I think that's the point. That's a part of his arc, that he isn't capable of challenging that yet, because he doesn't have the confidence to, and he doesn't know where he is in this world yet.
Is that like that sounds like your interpretation, but is there anything in the film that even suggests that?
Well, because the whole movie is about him becoming, like, learning to become a symbol, and him struggling with his inability to accept that place. Do you know what I mean? So, like, for example, there's that scene where he kind of goes, he sort of floats away from Lois, and he says, like, oh, damn, what does he say? Sorry, you've seen this movie more recently than I have. He sort of floats away from her. It's like...
The scene that I'm thinking of, is this in Man of Steel?
Batman v Superman, when he,
Okay.
right before he decides that he's gonna go and fight Batman, or try to
Oh, he
convince
says,
Batman.
no one stays good in this world.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah. That's
right, because at that point, Lex Luthor says, I've got your mom hidden, and I'm going to kill her in an hour unless you kill Batman. And,
yeah, so the idea is he's reckoning with other people's idea of him, and he doesn't think that he can hold up to those ideals. So when he floats away and says, you know, no one stays good in this world, it's kind of a cheesy line, but he's sort of talking about himself. He doesn't think he...
Well, right, because he's realizing that he's kind of trapped in this situation where he's like, I don't know where my mom is. I only have an hour. Of course, I think in the comics, you could probably just do something. Superman's got super speed. He's just like, okay, I have checked every spot in Metropolis, and it only took me a minute. If they had done that, like, I would have preferred him, like, go and do, like, a frantic search for his mom first before just deciding to directly go and confront Batman.
Oh my
now,
God,
I know the way
that's
that he says it is he's...
scene. That's the scene that they... Yeah. It's not in the...
Well, it wasn't
cut.
even in the Ultimate Cut, then.
Yeah, they should have fucking put that back in, honestly.
Well, if it's a deleted scene, then it's not in the movie, then you can't... You can't use that. Because it wasn't in there. If that had been in there, that would have been much preferable. I didn't really like how it felt like Superman gave up pretty much right away on the idea of trying to convince Batman, because he really didn't try very hard. Obviously, like, you know, Batman was hitting him with stuff right away, but he's, you know, he's Superman. He can take it. Until Batman brings out the kryptonite, all he's doing is annoying him.
Yeah, but I think that's another aspect of their battle is, and this is one thing I really like about the movie, is it's not just saying, you know, who would win in a fight between Batman and Superman, right? It's pitting them against each other ideologically, and it's saying, you know, Batman is a man, and he's driven by vengeance. That was the original thing. The line between justice and vengeance is far more blurry with Batman than it is with Superman. Because Superman, a criminal didn't kill Superman's parents. You know, like, so that's never been a thing. Sorry, I'm getting a fucking phone call.
Well, I mean, Zod killed his dad, but yeah, like, he didn't know that until
Zod's in vengeance or anything like that.
Yeah, no, he killed Zod because Zod was going to kill that family. And I don't have I know a lot of people were complaining, oh, you made Superman kill. I think Superman did the right thing in killing Zod in that scene. But I think the way that Zack Snyder treats his characters as characters that kill, he seems very uninterested in actually examining that. Like, I've often said that I don't have a problem writing a story in which Batman is a killer, but you need to actually dig into that, and you need to make that like a central part of the storyline, because Batman for so long, I mean, sure, you go back to the original comics, he had a gun and he was killing people, but then because of the comics code, they're like, oh, you know, they need to be good, and they gave him the no-kill code, and that became a central tenet of his character for a very long time. And you've had stories where Batman does break that code, or tries to break that code because he's driven to that point. And that can be interesting storytelling. But Zack Snyder's Batman never has a no-kill code. It's never brought up. There's a little bit of talking about how he, ever since seeing Superman fight Zod 2 years ago, he's gotten crueler. Like, he's starting to brand criminals with a little bat thing. But there's never any discussion where, like, when he goes to rob Lex Luthor and try and get the kryptonite, he's killing people all over the place, and it's never even addressed.
I do think the Batman killing people stuff in the movie is, like, very muddy. Like, I don't think it's presented perfectly. But I do think you're given enough cues to understand that Batman's, because you can't fill in 20 years of, because he's been Batman for 20 years. You can't fill in all of that. You know what I mean?
You could have a couple lines. There is a perfect scene where you could have had that conversation because there's already the scene where Alfred is talking about how, that's where it starts, the rage that turns good men cruel. That's the perfect scene for him to be like, you didn't used to kill. And they don't even say that.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take a lot. And there's obviously stuff set up there for you to have that explained, because you've got the hints. You've got the Robin's costume with Joker written on it, so that Robin's been killed by Joker at this point. There's a whole setup where you could have been like, you didn't used to kill, but also the way that Batman is so cavalier about it, if he's been driven to kill, it should be something that he takes with serious weight, not just... And, this is a problem that, the Tim Burton Batman had, where he was just comically blowing people up, and, he didn't care about it at all. That I really didn't like. And for the Zack Snyder Batman to basically do the same thing, when, Tim Burton's Batman was a very cartoony movie, whereas Zack Snyder tries to bring a little more gravitas to his films, or at least, the aesthetics of gravitas. So it feels like that should be addressed, but then you see interviews with Zack Snyder, and Zack Snyder's like, oh, well, you don't know if he killed it, the car killed it. It's like, well, he was driving the car, man. The Batman that I know in the comics would never be so careless.
I know what interview you're talking about. In that interview, Zack Snyder isn't exactly a fucking wordsmith, but in that interview, he's talking about how Batman sees things. And he's talking about how, from Batman's perspective, he doesn't see himself as having killed these, I don't know what examples there are, but, basically there's heaps of times where Batman shoots someone and they blow up, or he's getting shot at someone and then he crashes into them and stuff like that. But he never kills anyone directly, as in you don't see him choke someone to death or break their neck or anything like that. It's always... He
just uses guns for it. That's another thing, is that, Batman hates guns.
Batman hates guns, and he uses them all the fucking time. In heaps of different comics. He's a total hypocrite.
Sure,
The Dark Knight Returns.
Well, yeah, the Dark Knight Returns, that's that's a very... I mean, for one, it's Frank Miller, who's, I think Frank Miller and Zack Snyder are pretty good matches for each other. I think 300 was a pretty good film for what it was trying to accomplish, which was, Greco-Roman fascist aesthetic kind of a thing. I think, I don't think Zack Snyder's a fascist, but I do think he has the kind of the aestheticization of fascism down pat. And so I think that 300 worked pretty well for that. Also, Zack Snyder just really likes his splash pages from comics. Yeah. And so that's where a lot of his action sequences end up being. And I think, it looks visually impressive, but then at some point it seems like he doesn't care about necessarily the logic of what got him to that splash panel. He just wants to direct that splash panel. And he wants to make it about that splash panel rather than the story itself.
Well, Zack has always been an aesthetics guy, right? And he's gotten in trouble in the past for this, because there was one interview where he said that he liked an Ayn Rand book.
The Fountainhead, he wants to adapt it, right?
Yeah, he's a fan of I think he thinks it's an important sort of is an American book or something.
Ayn Rand, she was a Russian immigrant to the U.S., so yeah, it's American.
So yeah, he thought it was an important piece of aesthetic literature because of how powerful the descriptions are in it and stuff like that. And he got in a bit of trouble because then it's well, she has kind of political positions, and he eventually walked that back and said, well, I don't know about Ayn Rand's political positions. I just like the vibes.
Yeah, I don't think Zack Snyder is some deeply political person. I think he's just a dude. And I think he directs films that, like, you know, I was reading an interview with him. Actually, I was very curious about that line where he said, he's like, oh, you know, in my film, Batman could get raped. And like a lot of people were bringing that one out to be like, how can we trust this guy with Batman if that's his opinion? But that interview was actually in 2009 when he was talking about Watchmen.
Yeah.
And
oh,
so
yeah. That whole thing
so,
was about how like Alan Moore had to use made up characters because DC would never let him, even in an Elseworld story.
Well, he actually wanted to use the Charleston Comics characters because they had recently acquired that catalog, but they had other plans for those, so all of his characters are actually just ersatz versions of Charleston Comics characters. Rorschach is the Question.
Yeah.
But it feels like, so I think a lot of people do just kind of have a knee-jerk reaction there, because, like, once I saw the context where he's actually talking about, he's like, that could happen in my film, referring to Batman being raped. The film he's talking about is Watchmen. He's not talking about making a hypothetical Batman movie where Batman gets raped. He was specifically talking about Watchmen.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, as soon as a lefty sees that, they're gonna take it and run with it.
Yeah, and I think it is a silly idea. I mean, like, to be fair, there is in fact rape in Watchmen, so like that is an understandable thing to say. But you know, I think a lot of people see that and they just run with it. But I think Zack Snyder is a vibes-based director. I don't think he has any deep political analysis of what he's doing. So I don't think he's some fascist, hardcore right-winger. I think he probably has personally fairly progressive positions, at least, you know, from a social standpoint, just because, you know, he's working in Hollywood. You typically are going to run into people who have generally socially progressive positions there.
And his version of Superman, I think, is overwhelmingly progressive because he sees Superman as an immigrant, essentially, and he kind of heightens that idea of Superman that just because someone comes from outside doesn't mean they can't teach us something about ourselves, which I think is really important.
Is that the read you got from Man of Steel? I didn't see that at all from it.
Not from Man of Steel, from Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I think it's not a complete arc. Man of Steel isn't a complete arc. It is missing something.
Yeah,
I just watched Man of Steel. It is a good movie. I'm not.
I mean, I just watched all of them. So, like, if that's your read from it, that sounds like something you would like to see from it. I don't think that's in the film at all. I don't think that's portrayed at all.
Why not?
Because I just. What do you mean? Why not? Like, that's not part of the film. At no point is there anything brought together about, you know, him being like an immigrant story. That's just textually not in there.
What about the scene when he says, I grew up in Kansas. I'm about as American as it gets.
I mean...
Because they were afraid that he was an alien and he was going to act against America's interests.
That's probably the closest that you could get to it being an immigrant story, and that's really... You know what that scene read to me as? Like, their way to... They wanted to do the truth, justice, and the American way without it sounding cheesy and campy, because truth, justice, and the American way is cheesy and campy.
Mm.
That's what that sounded like to me.
When I say an immigrant story, to be clear, I'm not saying, like, there has to be a bunch of really clear lines where they talk about how he is an immigrant. What I'm talking about is mythically an immigrant story, like Moses and the Reeds. Like, idea that, like, someone from outside gets sent to us, and then they actually help lift us up.
Sure, but that's baked into the Superman mythos. That's not something Zack Snyder did, right?
No, I'm not saying that's something Zack Snyder did. I'm saying Zack Snyder took that, and he grounded it, and he brought out the mythic qualities that were already, like, obviously there.
I don't know. I I guess no, I would agree that he definitely has like I don't know about grounding it. His Superman is definitely a mythic character.
Well, it can be
So,
both. You can be both grounded and mythic. Like a movie can have more than one lens, right? So like Clark Kent as a character, he is treated basically like a human in how he acts and how he speaks. It's not like he's this like omniscient know-it-all, right?
right.
He has like arguments with his boss about, oh, this is what the paper should stand for and stuff like that. Like he's just a guy.
Right.
But then he is viewed in other ways by other perspectives. And that scene that you were talking about before, where basically everyone like views him as a god, right? And like there's that shot of them reaching out to him, this kind of like beautiful shot, and he's up in the sky. When that montage starts, you see his face, and as the montage continues, we get further and further away from him, and now we don't even see his face anymore. It's up in the clouds, basically, and we're viewing it from the perspective of others. I think Zack Snyder, being a visualist, is very interested in showing Superman through more than one prism of analysis, rather than just he's an immigrant. Like, you can be grounded and mythic.
Yeah, that sounds kind of... I don't know. That doesn't sound like any kind of a deep film analysis to me.
No, it's very simple.
Yeah, but like that's kind of what I've come to expect from the Snyder fans. Like when people point to like the deep symbolism of Superman talking to the priest in the church with the Gethsemane stained glass window in the background, and it's like that's not like subtle filmmaking. That's about like as on the nose as you can get. That Superman is having his Garden of Gethsemane moment.
Does it have to be subtle?
It doesn't have to be, but like I've seen Snyderbro go. It's like, oh my god, look at that! That's so deep and so like it's not that deep. Like everybody's been compared to Jesus from like the beginning of cinema. Like it's one of the oldest tricks in the book.
Well, but this is a problem a lot of people have with analysis, where they see something and they see a religious allegory being made, and they think that's as deep as it is. They just think, oh, he's like Jesus. Okay, got it. Figured it all out. Well, maybe he's not like Jesus. Maybe someone thinks he's like Jesus, and that's what the story is actually about.
Is that the read that you got from the movie?
Well, the read I got from the movie is that Superman's just an ordinary guy who's trying to do the right thing. But because he has these powers, and because the world sees him a certain way, everything gets muddy. Which is inevitable, because like if you've got godlike powers, people are going to project onto you whatever they want to project onto you. How do you not get that from Batman v Superman and that montage that you were talking about?
I actually think I think you might have a point there.
It's not Zack Snyder saying Superman is a god. Zack Snyder is saying that we see him as a god because we would. If he was real, you're crazy if you don't think we would see him as a god.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There would definitely be aspects of that. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of ways to do the Superman story. You're correct in that way. I think for a lot of people, especially, is like when you're dealing with like, I think it's a lot easier to do an analysis of that in something like the comics, where there's not really like a limit on how many comics can be written about Superman, right? But you can only have like one Superman movie every couple years, and I think a lot of people aren't really looking to see the mainline Superman for, you know, a decade be your like basically an Elseworlds analysis of what if Superman was this.
Well, a lot of people are looking. I know what a lot of people are looking for when it comes to superhero movies, and it's not much. People want superhero movies to be really surface level. Like, people want superheroes to be fighting CGI aliens in like bland gray city landscapes.
Well, I don't think anybody wants a bland gray city landscapes. I think Marvel just keeps doing that because it's cheaper.
But the people do respond to it, which is the problem. And by the way, I'm not blaming the people for this. I think it's just a mistake that Hollywood makes, that they react to like stimuli way too quickly. Like you know, the whole conversation about what was that one tweet where it was complaining about that Mission Impossible scene, where they were complaining about the dialogue because they were like, "This is fucking Disney Channel dialogue."
No, no, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that tweet.
It's a problem people have with sincerity, where like everything, they need everything to have jokes in it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's definitely the Joss Whedon Marvel problem. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and now obviously Joss Whedon isn't solely to blame. He's just largely to blame. But
I think like when Joss Whedon first came on the scene with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like that kind of like irreverent jokiness was kind of seen as fresh. But then everyone just did it because like he did it with the Avengers, and then like basically everyone was doing it after that point. And I think it's just one of those things where it's tired now.
I'm making the point that like say there's the fairy kingdom, and then there's like the dark castle, and there's the two diverging paths. And if you had to choose one, would you pick a Zack Snyder movie that's, you know, edgy, maybe it kind of is convoluted and shitty with its story, but it's edgy, it's sincere, it treats the characters with sort of mythic grandeur, and then the other is, you know, constantly making jokes, nothing can be serious. You say Illuminati, he says Illumawati, you know, like everything has to have a joke, lay it all over it. I would choose the DC path rather than the Marvel path.
I do like sincerity. You know, I feel, fortunately, that having the, you know, two paths and you can only pick one or the other, that's a hard decision for me, but thank God there's somebody like James Gunn who understands how to do jokes and sincerity.
Yeah. Well, James Gunn's a great example because he does like that dark shit, doesn't he? But he also likes sort of irreverent jokiness.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not afraid to go dark. And I think lots of movies got the wrong message from the negative response that Batman v Superman had. And they thought, oh, we're scared of darkness. But it's
no,
not really darkness.
I don't have a problem with darkness in movies. I feel like you can do it wrong. You can do it like where it's just like, okay, you're just like a I'm 14 and this is deep kind of edginess to it. Zack Snyder really does feel like say you might have graduated from watching Michael Bay movies to Zack Snyder movies, kind of a thing, you know? Where
I just cringed so hard when you said that.
I mean, am I wrong though? It's kind of a similar demographic there. Like, you think
you're not entirely wrong. It is. Oh God, how do I word this? Obviously, there are people who love Michael Bay, who obviously love Zack Snyder as well. Because what Zack Snyder does, his movies, they're loud, they're colorful, they're stupid sometimes, they're violent, they are expressive, because they're sincere. And they're loud. I don't think they're sincere, because they're they just have jokes all the time. Robots humping people's legs and stuff like that. Like, I don't
Sure.
think they're sincere. But they
No,
are
but I
loud.
was mostly comparing like the being edgy and dark kind of a thing. Like, yeah, I don't think like edginess for the sake of edginess is like, you know, that's a very juvenile way of writing, I think.
I do think Zack Snyder is edgy sometimes for the sake of edgy.
I was reading in that interview,
He's an
the Watchmen
aesthetics
interview that he
guy.
did. Yeah, he's an aesthetics guy, but like in the interview about Watchmen that he did, like he was talking about how when he grew up reading comics, it was just like he had to go for stuff that had like, you know, more sex and violence in it, because like he would just be seeing like the superhero comics that other people would be reading, and he'd be like, nah, that's not enough for me. So he's like, but then his mom got him like a subscription to Heavy Metal magazine, and he's like, yeah, this is for me. And I'm just like, okay, that makes perfect sense that Zack Snyder would have had a subscription to Heavy Metal magazine as a teenager.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing, right? Zack Snyder is talking about when he grew up.
Yeah.
So what kind of comics did he have when he grew up versus what comics we have now? Because I can guarantee you, nowadays, kids
Well,
aren't
nowadays we
saying-
have more stuff like that. Yeah, like I'm thinking, because like I'm not that much younger than Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder's what, in his 40s?
I
he
think
was
he's 50 something. He looks
50
really
something.
good.
Okay, well I'm 38, so you know shit. I mean, I grew up in the 90s. You want to talk about stupid, edgy, grimdark shit? Just look at any character created by Rob Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld was a response to that, just as what Zack Snyder's saying is a response. It's like people crave the darkness, and they'll get it whenever they can, if they're not getting enough of it, and obviously then it's an overcorrection, and then you get like really stupid, edgy shit like what Rob Liefeld used to do. Zack Snyder is 57 years old.
Jesus,
Holy
that dude
fuck.
looks great.
Yeah.
57, oh my god.
I thought it was like 51.
Yeah, I thought he was like late 40s. I don't know, what's his diet? Working for him.
It's comic books.
His diet is comic books. He eats Superman and shits
edgy-
Batman.
Yeah, he eats edgy comic books and
Yeah.
grey ice cream.
Okay, so, what else do we have here to talk about?
So you watched all 3 movies, right?
I watched all 3 movies, yeah.
Yeah,
and
extended cut of Batman v Superman.
The extended cut of Batman v Superman, which mostly is just there so that Lex Luthor's plot makes sense.
It does not make sense in the theatrical cut. Like,
no,
it's
it doesn't at all, because it cuts out the entire subplot of Lois investigating and finding out that, like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that that Lex is doing that when you see it, you're like, okay, now I'm actually following this movie. But I still think that the whole fight itself, the way that Superman just gives up so quickly on trying to convince Bruce and just goes and actually fights him, that was just there. I was just like, okay, they just really wanted Superman and Batman to fight, and they hadn't thought this part out. So it was a pretty... Oh, I just died. Pretty lazy part of that film. And I don't think that the Batman as portrayed in Batman versus Superman was well thought out. I don't know how familiar Zack Snyder is with Batman in the comics. I mean, I know that he's probably read, you know, Frank Miller's stuff on him, which, you know, like, that was definitely a seminal work on Batman in the 80s. But it feels like he just was, like, assuming that the idea that he's got in his head of Batman would translate to other people. But it really didn't.
I think people overstate Dark Knight Returns' influence on Batman v Superman, because
I mean, he said it was.
no, it is. There is an influence, obviously, but again, Snyder's an aesthetics bro, I don't think he is actually saying the same thing that Frank Miller was trying to say with that book.
No, because I don't really think he had much at all to say about Batman. I don't think he captured Batman's essence very well. Like I said, there's a really good story that you could tell about why Batman is now killing. But Zack Snyder wasn't interested in telling that story. Zack Snyder just decided to have Batman just casually kill people.
I think, I, I, I think Batman casually killing people is the point. I think he's so.
If it was the point, it would have been more textually addressed.
It was. It was in his decision to spare Superman.
Well, but like the idea, his calculation of killing Superman, that's like, one of the times like, okay, here is where I have actually decided to break my rule. But he doesn't have the one rule in this movie because he's just killing mooks. Right? Like, he goes to rescue Martha and he just kills everyone there.
Well, if your greatest problem with the movie is just that there wasn't one line of dialogue where he said, I didn't used to kill people, but now I do.
It's kind of important. Like, you can have one line of dialogue, like, really change the framing of the film. And it's never even one line of dialogue is given to it. The closest that we get is Alfred noting that he's gotten more cruel since Zod attacked. But yeah, like I really think that if you're gonna tell a story in which Batman kills, it should be a bigger part of the story.
Well, man, I feel like people misunderstand like Batman's whole arc in that movie, because like people complain about how they didn't like the intro and seeing his like parents die again, because it's like we already knew that stuff. It's like, well, how much stuff do you need spoon-fed to you, and how much stuff are you willing to let the movie say you already knew? Because Batman not killing people is already an established part of his mythology. So, like, how much do we have to bring that up before we challenge it?
No, I'm sorry. That's that's just an excuse for lazy filmmaking. That's like that sounds like some of your other reads too. They just sound like they're things that you would have liked the movie to address, but they're not things that were actually there.
Well, let's talk about the opening scene, right? Sure. So, like, and as we all know, his parents are killed, right?
Spoilers! Oh my god!
I know, right? Oh fuck! Fucking ruined the movie. But his parents are killed, and that sort of sets him on his path of justice or vengeance, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. We know Batman.
Right. But it's important that the movie reminds you of this, because I think it's like the key to the whole story. Because of the... God, do we want to talk about the Martha scene?
I mean, we kind of have to now that you brought it up.
What's your read on the Martha scene, by the way? Because I don't know.
It's funny. Before Batman vs Superman came out, maybe a couple months before, I noticed when I was looking up. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Clark and Bruce's mom have the same name. I wonder if that'll ever come up in a movie. And it came up in the stupidest way possible. Like, I understand, like, I've seen the most charitable reads of what it was going for, in that, like, by Bruce being reminded of his mother, that it helps him realize that Clark is basically just human, like the rest of them, and he, he's not some mythic god who's rising above us. He's just a guy. But that was very clunkily written.
I think that read is kind of correct, but I think it's overstating the Martha thing. I don't think the Martha, like, the moment where he hears the name, I don't think that's him, like, in that moment deciding, oh, Superman's a human because he has a mother. And that's just him deciding in that moment. I think that's just the word that shook him out of the spell he was under at the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that... I mean, obviously it's impossible to know what's going on in Batman's head in that scene, but, like, I don't think that was the scene he decided we're friends now. I think that was just him deciding this isn't right. I can't kill him right now. Like, something's wrong. I need to reassess what I'm doing.
I mean, the very next scene that we see him in is rescuing Superman's mom and says, "Hey, I'm a friend of your son's." So that's like that's very much directly where he decides, okay, I'm not killing this guy and we're friends now.
Well, he says I'm a friend of your son's because I mean, what else do you say? Like, I'm a
sure,
superhero,
but like,
but I think that's giving that too much away. I think he saves her not because he's like, I'm Superman's best buddy, I'm gonna do him a solid. He saves her because he's trying to save his own mother. It's a selfish act, actually. It's not him becoming selfless yet. I don't think his arc ends with him not killing Superman. I think his arc extends beyond that, until Superman sacrifices himself at the end. That's when Batman changes.
I mean, I guess that was pretty much all the opportunity that he had to have characterization, because, like, he had the fight with Superman the same night that Doomsday attacks.
Well, because, you know, and they do kind of spell it out. Like, he says, I give you my word, Martha won't die tonight. So clearly it's like, okay, this dude's still in his own head, and he's doing this for selfish reasons. By saving Superman's mother, he's trying to redeem himself and save his own mother. This isn't really about him saving, like, Superman's mother.
Sure. I just think it's clunky.
It's a bit muddy, but I think it's clear enough. Like, again,
I don't think people didn't think it was clear. I don't think, like, it was confusing at all. I just think that having the whole plot of Batman, like, you know, teaming up with Superman because their moms had the same name, like, that seems like an idea that you should have pitched to a writer's room, and then they go, you can't fucking do that.
Yeah, but you just worded it really badly to make it sound like a bad idea. I don't think he teams up with Superman because their mother has the same name. He hears the word Martha and he stops. That's what actually happens. They don't become friends because, like, your mom has the same name? My mom has the same name. Hey! Like, that's not really what happened. I know people like to meme that, but if you watch the scene, like, it's a direct mirror to the opening scene, which is why the word Martha is, like, what completes the spell. And so, like, in the opening scene, Bruce's parents are murdered, and the only line uttered in that scene is Martha, as Thomas Wayne says it. And Bruce hears that word, and if you're a kid, you don't know the name of your mother. So,
wait,
like,
yes,
that
you do.
I didn't.
Yeah,
I just called her mom.
I mean, well, of course you call them mom, but you hear your parents talk to each other, and they just use each other's names.
I didn't know. Maybe I'm stupid, but I didn't know.
No, I knew my mom's name.
My mom has two. My mom does have two, like, separate names, and she has a pet name. My dad called her, so I actually did not know my mother's name. But the point I'm getting at is that's not really my point. The point I'm getting at is that he hears that word, and it's the last word on his father's lips, right? And his father dies. His dying word is Martha. So, like,
no, I mean, I get it. I don't think that it works very well for the film. I think most people are going to think it's silly.
Most people did think it was silly, but most people are stupid.
Yeah. I mean, okay, like, I you know, this is all subjective in the end, but, like, I mean, there's a reason you're the Snyderbro and I'm not.
Well, what I'm saying here, I'm talking about, like, again, Zack Snyder does things through visuals. He doesn't really spell stuff out for you. Now, I'm not saying that means he's a genius and, like, oh yeah, his movies are so deep. No, I think his movies are very simple because that's how visuals work. Like, you have to have a simple idea for a visual to tell that story. And I think by opening the movie with Bruce's parents dying, and you have that image of him standing alone, and the mother and the father dead right there before him, and then if you flash forward and you have Batman standing over Superman with that spear in his hand, demanding, why did you say that name? Like, what does that mean? Why did you say that name? Lois comes over, and it completes the picture, because now he is standing over a man and a woman, and he's the perpetrator. Do you know what I mean?
Were they framed the same? I would need to go back and to rewatch the scene of the Wayne's death, but if they were actually framed that same way, I think that would have been good, and it'd be something that I missed. But
I don't know if they were framed the same way. I'm just talking about how it he doesn't become Superman's friend the moment he hears that word. In fact, I think he gets madder at Superman when he hears that word, because he probably thinks this is some kind of trickery. He hears that name, and he steps on Superman's neck even harder, and he says, "Why did you say that name? Like, what the hell does that mean? I can't kill you now because I gotta know what the fuck that means. Why did you say my mother's name?" And it isn't until Lois shows up and stands by Superman's side, and she proclaims it's his mother's name. And that's when Batman kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. Like, yeah, sure, but like, that doesn't mean that that's a good scene in that regard. Honestly, it wasn't framed that way, I am pretty sure, but like, if it had been, where like they had like a very specific shot at the beginning of the movie where Joe Chill is standing over, say he's shot Thomas, and Martha is there like cradling him and looking up at Joe Chill looking down on them. And if they had mirrored that shot for Batman standing over Superman with Lois cradling him, if they had done that, I think that would have been some very interesting, very, very good storytelling in that regard. But I don't think they did that.
I'm not saying that it was framed the same way. I'm saying, well, maybe I did say that, but
you kind of implied that they were similar framing.
I'm saying it completes the set. Lois showing up and standing by Superman's side. It's the moment where it clicks. So that's my only
for you, I guess. Like, I'm just saying, if that had been the intention, that's not how I read it. But if they had shot it more deliberately like that, I think that would have been cool. I think that would have been a cool visual. I don't think that's in there.
It probably would have improved the scene if they like somehow managed to the shots look the same. But I think it's still pretty clear that like Batman isn't going to kill this guy now, because there's no way that Batman would. Like, his psychology would never allow him to kill Superman anymore.
Yeah.
Now that this has been said, and like now he's just like standing there looking at a woman and a man. He's looking down at them, just as he looked down at his parents. But now he's the perpetrator. I think it's still pretty clear. And again, I'm not saying this is like a masterpiece of gold or anything. I just think that's very simple storytelling. I think people miss out because they want to meme the Martha line so much.
It is a pretty memeable line.
It is.
Like, and
but I
you know,
don't think it ruins the arc of the character.
I just think it's a little silly. There's a lot of ideas that like you'd be like, okay, I get where you're going for. That could have been done well. It just wasn't. And it almost feels like you have this idea of what like the perfect execution of that scene would have been in your head, but that's not the scene that was actually there.
To be clear, I don't think these movies are perfect. I think they're really good, and I think they're way stronger than a lot of other stuff like Marvel tries to do.
Certainly, there's a lot of Marvel slop out there, and I would much rather have a director actually trying something new and failing at it than us just getting another samey MCU film 3 times a year. And this is speaking as somebody who has been a longtime MCU fanboy, and boy, Phase 4 was pretty pathetic.
Yep. And to be clear, like, also, by the way, if I made a fucking Superman movie, alright, it would be fucking nothing like what Zack Snyder did. Like, I'm not saying his aesthetics align perfectly with mine. I'm just saying I see, like, see the vision. You know what I mean? Like I see what he's going for, and I think he mostly got it really right, especially with the Snyder Cut, which I think was fucking fantastic.
Are you talking the Justice League Snyder cut or the BVS one?
The Justice League Snyder Cut.
Okay.
Well, the BVS one, I don't even seen the theatrical cut in ages. I don't even know what.
Yeah, I was thinking,
like
Snyder
20
Cut
minutes?
usually refers, because we were talking BVS, so that's why I was asking. Because
Yeah.
Snyder Cut usually refers to the Justice League cut.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Justice League, by the way?
Yeah, that was the
It's
one I
kinda
most
like,
recently saw. So,
Fucking long movie. It doesn't feel long. though, in my
oh,
opinion.
I watched it yesterday. I guarantee you, it felt long.
Oh yeah. I think it feels 3 hours rather than 4 hours, which is still long, but not that long.
It's. Can we talk about the aspect ratio of that movie? Because it looked like
you didn't dislike the aspect ratio, did you?
yeah, because like,
Aw.
look, if it had been released in IMAX, that's a perfectly good use of that aspect ratio. But he was editing it to be released directly on a streaming service, and you should make your film fit the medium that it's being released in.
Well, what? Do you not have like a big TV or whatever?
Almost every TV has like a 16:9 aspect ratio.
Yeah, but you did film it to be a certain way, and I feel like it would be kind of if you're gonna do the Snyder Cut, right? You're gonna release this like 4-hour-long vision of this director, unsullied. You might as well let him do his silly aspect ratio.
I mean, like, I guess if it had been, theatrically released, he would have released it in IMAX. So, but yeah, do you feel like that aspect ratio added things to the film? Because I really don't.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I wasn't sure at first, but I loved it because it like you said, like Zack Snyder is a splash page guy.
Yeah.
And that ratio, that is the closest you will ever get to the comic book ratio. Superhero is standing tall in the center of a page, right? Like, widescreen is cinematic. Like, tall screen is comic book. So he managed to do something really nice, which is make an entire movie in the aspect ratio and bring it as close as humanly possible to the comic book ratio. While still, it's still a movie, it's still cinematic, but
That's actually the logic that Joss Whedon had for filming Avengers in 16:9. Is he's like, look, we've got big characters, and we want to make sure they fill the whole screen. We want to make sure that you can have a shot where you've got both Hulk and Black Widow in the same frame, and so that's why it was not a wider format film. That's why it was a little taller.
But unfortunately, he's not a good cinematographer in the same way that Zack Snyder is, because that movie doesn't really hold up very well, in my opinion.
The first Avengers movie, I think it's pretty good.
No, I think it's good, but visually,
visually, sure. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think Zack Snyder definitely has a more distinctive visual style. I will give you that. Marvel movies do feel pretty samey.
I'm not comparing them because obviously Zack Snyder's a better, like, visual director. I'm just saying, the Avengers, like, something about that movie, when I rewatch it, it's almost like it has, like, literally no color grading. Like, it's just, they shot it on digital and then they just released it. It's very, I don't know, it's very flat. Wish that it had a bit more punch to it, more contrast and stuff.
Well, that's just kind of the Marvel problem. Like, pretty much every Marvel movie is like horribly desaturated and lots of it's like when video games were like trying to be like, oh, this is a real video game, which means it's brown and gray.
Yeah.
Because we're going for realism, and real is brown. You know,
Like,
yeah, it kind
why
of
would you want to go for realism when you're making a fucking comic book movie?
comic book movie. Yeah, no, I agree.
Wouldn't
I
you want to
like
go
my
for
comic
like
book movies to be colorful. Like
stylized contrast and crazy, shots? I don't know.
yeah,
I would make a very colorful comic book movie if I could. Like, I would go crazy with the colors. I'd make like Aquaman. Like that movie is like the perfect comic book movie, in my opinion.
it was a very colorful movie. It was it my friend called it Wet Thor, which is kind of but yeah, I would generally agree. I just watched Blue Beetle today, and that's a very colorful movie.
I haven't seen that. Is that good?
Well, I'm gonna give my review on it on Thursday because that's when I usually do my film reviews. I just saw it like 2 hours before I started stream, so I haven't really had a time to formulate my thoughts on it yet.
I just watched your review on the that Dracula movie that came out. I'm thinking of seeing that.
I was really hoping it would have been better. Like, it's a really cool, high concept movie. Vampire on a boat. But like I said in the title, like I was expecting it to be a lot more claustrophobic and more like an old school version of Alien. But it was
I'm not expecting it to be any good. But I have read the book, and that was always like a really interesting part of the book that's like not touched upon. Is the,
I have never read Dracula.
Doomed ship of the Demeter or whatever it is. Like
how much of pages. It was only 2 pages. I figured it was something small like that. Yeah, because I've never read Dracula, and actually, I think I only learned that it was in fact a part of the book once like the movie starts and they say, yes, this is in fact a part of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, Universal's weird though, because they're trying to do the like Marvel expanded universe.
They keep trying it and they keep failing, and so they like. I mean, their big one where they were really putting the big bucks into it was The Mummy, the Tom Cruise one. They figured this is going to be the one because they announced the Dark Universe where they got like 5 people to pose for a photo, even though they were very clearly not even there at the same time to shoot that photo. But I think a cinematic universe is one of those things where you have to have a good movie first before you can say this is going to be a franchise.
This is gonna sound like a hot take as a like comic book geek. I don't really get like the obsession with like everything needs to be this like consistent universe where everything connects and everyone has to like have a solo movie and then they meet up in a later movie and everyone's soy faces.
It's I guess how old were you when the Avengers came out?
Oh, I was a perfect age. I fucking loved that movie when I saw it. I was like, come out.
It came out in 2012.
2012. Yeah, I would have been 14.
14? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so for me, I was in my 20s when that movie came out, and I had been growing up where superhero movies were always like their own thing. Nobody ever got to interact with each other. Even when we were having movies like Spider-Man and X-Men come out, and where I would really want to see Spider-Man and Wolverine team up, but it never happened. So when the Avengers came out and they actually did that, they actually did have superheroes from their own movies come and team up. It was novel at that point. I still think Avengers is a pretty fantastic movie because it was the first time that we got to see that we actually can do this and it can work. Nowadays though, everyone's doing their shared universes and there's nothing special about it anymore,
I don't even think it's just that, because obviously it's going to become less special the more you do it. I think I think they're just too interested in trying to like instantly create a universe. Like, people don't watch movies because they're excited for other movies. People watch
every movie is a trailer for the next movie. Yeah, that's the big problem with it.
I don't really care like what your next movie is. Like, if I see it, I'll see it. But I just want to enjoy whatever story you want to tell me now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was like a huge problem with like the Amazing Spider-Man movies, was they wanted to jump off to do like a franchise building right away. And so Sony keeps trying that stuff. Honestly, I think Sony's best move they ever could have made was just entering into the deal with Marvel, because it's like, okay, Marvel actually knows how to do this, and maybe we can just finally have some hits by, you know, leeching off of Marvel's clout for it. But yeah, no, movies should not be a trailer for the next movie. And honestly, that's something that I am going to, you know, fault
Criticize Batman v Superman for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and the Snyder Cut, because both of those are kind of teasing the whole. I'm actually not familiar with. Is it Injustice where Lois Lane dies, and that's what causes Superman to go like evil and take over the world?
Yes. I don't know that much about Injustice, but I know like the story, like the video game story.
Yeah, like I figured that's what Zack Snyder's going for with it, because, you know, it's implied that that's why Superman goes evil and works with Darkseid, is because Lois was killed. And like, obviously the fact that we're not getting that movie makes it kind of like superfluous, but also that's another thing that I just really didn't like, is that they were always visions that Batman had. And since when is Batman the Prophet character? Like, when does he get premonitions of the future?
I think that's a reference to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Because in that, I don't know. I don't think he's like becomes like a prophet, but like the Flash shows up to him.
Yeah.
And the Flash is all like fucked up or whatever, and then like he shows up in the Batcave and starts screaming some nonsense. And then Batman's like, I don't know what any of that means, but I'm gonna act on it, I guess. And then he sort of has to like recruit people and stuff. I think it's like vaguely based on that.
Sure, but then in the Snyder Cut, like, we have that whole extended sequence where we go back to the nightmare. And, you know, like, the implication of that being this is, in fact, like, you know, the future that they're going to have to deal with once Lois Lane dies. At no point is it an implication that it's just Bruce Wayne having a nightmare. It's always portrayed as this is a flashback of the future that's going to come. Or not a flash forward, not a flashback.
Yeah.
You know? And
yeah, I do think that it is. Like, I don't think that's
Yeah.
Zack saying, oh, this is an alternate timeline or something. I'm pretty sure his intention was, like, this is gonna
that's
happen.
what he wanted to do. He, like, I get that, but, you know, it was putting the cart before the horse on that one.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I do think he did it not in the best way that he could have, but definitely in a better way than a lot of other movies would have done it, because he tied Batman's visions to his paranoia about Superman.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a storyteller, you do more than one thing. And that didn't just set up a bunch of movies that never fucking happened. It set up Batman's paranoia about Superman. So I will give him credit for that. Like, again, I don't like kind of stuff. I don't like being told, like, oh yeah, this movie you're watching isn't even the fucking full story. We're gonna do another story. I actually don't like that stuff. But I do think he did it in a better way than I've seen it done before.
It did help to fuel Batman's paranoia about Superman. I will grant you that.
The little the world engine, like, sound effects, like, always coming into Batman's dreams, like fucking dubstep shit, like, you know, that stuff.
Oh yeah, the world engine from Man of Steel.
Yeah. Every time he has a nightmare, it begins and ends with just like that sound. I think is a nice little touch.
I really did like that Batman vs Superman starts pretty much immediately where Man of Steel ended. Like, it literally has here's what Bruce was doing while Man of Steel was going on. Like, that I thought was a cool touch. And that did fuel his, you know, fear of Superman.
Yeah, and I remember as a kid getting so hyped about any little Batman Easter eggs in Man of Steel. They were really small. They weren't really set up. They were just
Were
like
there
Easter
any?
eggs.
Because I know there was the LexCorp truck, but that Lex is a Superman villain. I don't remember anything about like Wayne Enterprises in that movie at all.
There was a. Do you remember when Superman and Zod crash into the satellite?
Oh, was that a Wayne satellite?
Was one of Bruce Wayne's like Wayne satellites, and the symbol
Okay.
on it is the same symbol that you see.
It's the W. Okay.
Yeah, like later on when Batman is like he saved the kid, and there's like a symbol there. So that's like the same thing. And also there's another funny one that's more tongue in cheek. It was like a poster with the Tim Burton Batman logo on it, like the round one. In the background, when Superman's fighting Zod inside of like a building, and as the building's collapsing, you see it. If you pause and you see like a blurry Batman logo.
The only
says,
like quick joke.
It says like "look out" or something, and it's so it's like the joke is like out.
Right. There was like
Batman's gonna come.
one quick sight gag in Man of Steel that I caught, and it's when they're fighting in the building that's under construction, and there's a sign that said this site has gone like 160 days without an incident, and Zod throws Superman into it, and so he knocks off the 1-6, so it just says 0 days without an incident.
Yeah. There's some nice little sight gags.
That honestly felt like a Marvel kind of a sight gag to me.
It was so quick, like you could miss it.
It was very quick.
That's what I appreciate. Like you can only. I feel like a Marvel movie would have had like a silly like dong sound effect, and then like it would have had a close.
There was like a little bit of a sound effect there, but yeah, like the screen doesn't linger on it at all. Yeah, a Marvel movie I think would have like done like a separate shot where just focusing on the sign instead, but it's just like a background thing. I don't even know how much of that was like Zack Snyder's intention himself, because a lot of Easter egg things like that are just thrown in by the VFX teams, right?
Someone's just said it was a "keep calm and call the Batman" poster. Yeah, that's right. Keep calm and call Batman. Which is funny because someone is calling Bruce Wayne in that like exact moment in time, I think. Kind of ironic. Wasn't he like on the phone to some idiot that wouldn't get out of the building? So the building.
Yeah, he was calling. He was calling.
Get out of the building.
Metropolis.
It's currently collapsing. Oh, okay. I guess I'll get out of the building. Oh.
Yeah, that was a little silly. It's like, yeah, you don't need to call people to tell them to evacuate a building when you're seeing that aliens are attacking and half the buildings in Metropolis are being destroyed. That is something that I didn't touch on, is that the destruction of Metropolis in Man of Steel, like at no point in that battle does Clark try to get Zod away from the city. In fact, much of that destruction is caused by Clark himself directly punching Zod into buildings. There's
definitely
there are thousands of people who are dead in Man of Steel because Clark wasn't careful with his actions.
He does try to take Zod away once, but Zod keeps bringing the fight back down. He like flies them up. That's when he crashes into the satellite. They like fly up, right? But then Zod just punches him and then brings it back down. Like Zod doesn't give a fuck about the collateral damage.
Well, there's also the Smallville fight where Clark flies Zod like right into an IHOP. No, like it or was it the Fiora who threw him into the IHOP? No, it was the gas station. That's right. He threw Zod right into a gas station where there were people there, like gassing up.
Yeah, that I won't defend my homeboy for that. That was a bad move. But
it was a really bad move. Like
he was mad. His mom was.
Oh, I get he was mad. They had gone after his mom, but then he took the fight directly to Main Street, Smallville, and he fucked up his hometown.
It was kind of cringe because then he was like, "Stay inside. It's not safe." And it's like, "Whoa, why did you come here?" Yeah, I do agree. But again, that's kind of a problem with all of these fucking movies. Like, they always kind of just punch people through other buildings, and it's only more noticeable Zack Snyder's ones, because Zack Snyder does care to remind you that there are stakes, whereas Marvel movies will make jokes, so you don't think about the stakes. Like, the fucking destruction in the Avengers, that wasn't brought up until later movies. The movie wraps up and you don't think about it. You know what I mean?
Well, wait, no, there's like at the ending montage, there's people like, oh, who's gonna clean up this mess, and should look at what the Avengers have brought to us. Are they really heroes for us? And no, they talked about it in that movie.
They talk about it afterwards, but tonally, what does that feel like? What does the action in that movie feel like? It feels light. You don't feel that, oh my fucking god, so much destruction. Like, in Man of Steel, you're watching those fight scenes, Hans Zimmer's got that music playing. You're like, oh my god, this is bad. Like, these entire buildings are collapsing and people are dying. And this is, like, high stakes. I feel like in Avengers, there are stakes, but they don't really match what's actually happening. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching 9/11 when I feel like I should be watching 9/11. It should feel like 9/11 is basically happening, like 7 9/11s all at once are basically occurring in those movies.
I don't know that I agree with your assessment there. I think there's certainly like you get specific New Yorkers that are kind of like ascended extras, like the cute waitress who in a deleted scene had flirted with Captain America. She's kind of like the focal New Yorker who has to deal with the alien invasion. And then you've got Captain America is like barking orders to the cops to go and help out people. And there's a lot of there's like the people holed up in the library as the aliens are attacking. There's quite a lot of focus on trying to protect the civilians in that movie. And in Avengers 2, which isn't even a good movie, like the big, action set piece is them evacuating the city. I think there's quite a bit of care there taken to, like superheroes actually trying to protect
Avengers
people.
Avengers 2 did a lot better with that, I think, because Avengers 2, you felt, what was it, Sokovia?
Yeah.
You felt like there was just sort of a more of like a gritty sense of like destruction there for some reason. Like, whereas when I watch the Avengers, I don't know, maybe it is just the style, maybe it's just the visuals, but like.
Well, I think it probably helps that they had made up a fictional country and a fictional city, so they were able to just completely destroy it. Like, they're not going to destroy New York completely for a movie, so of course it was going to be limited to, say, 6 blocks around Stark Tower.
Again, like, even like that one example you said where like Captain America talks to a cop, it was played for a joke. Like, that was just another joke in that movie. When Captain America like kicks ass, he's like, "Oh, take orders from me," and they're like, "Why should we take orders from you?" And then Captain America.
Oh, that's true. That was a bit of a joke there, but it was
like,
still.
And then the cop's like, "Take orders from this guy." Oh my god, listen to everything that he says. He's an absolute genius. He knows what he's talking about.
Yes, it was funny, but they also did that. They showed that the superheroes actually cared about the human collateral damage, whereas the only time in the entire end fight where Superman is directly going to try and like save people is when he kills Zod to stop them from lasering those people.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, but I think the whole point of the scene is it weighs down on you. Like, as you're watching all this destruction, weighing down on you more and more, and that's the moment where it's like, okay, Superman, come on. Like, at this point, you need to end this, because now it's not. Again, it's like the difference between like.
I feel like you could have had that realization probably 3 buildings beforehand.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have had a cool action scene.
You can have cool action scenes while also like, honestly, I think having Clark, having maybe multiple scenes where like at least like 1 or 2 shots of Clark trying to get Zod away from the city, but Zod like throws him back toward the city. Like, do more of that to at least show that Clark's doing more than like a single token effort to get the fighting away from the city.
I agree with that. I mean, they could have done better, but I still believe that the reason people criticize this movie is just because it mentioned, just because of the tone. The tone begs people. The tone begs the question, whereas the tone in the Avengers makes you not think about it too much. So I think that the grittier tone that they went for with Man of Steel means that people think more about the collateral damage. But the collateral damage is always going to be there anyway, in either case.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I think the collateral damage is quite shown in the Marvel movies. I just think the fact that the Marvel movies aren't as serious means you're probably not going to take the collateral damage as seriously, but it's still there. You still see it.
It is there, but I just prefer tonally what Man of Steel did.
I don't have a problem tonally with the way that they portrayed the destruction. I just wish Superman himself had shown a little bit more concern and care for trying to prevent that destruction, and he really doesn't.
He does save a few people, like catches this one guy. Catches a guy falling out of like a helicopter. And he goes like, "Are you alright?"
Oh, that was that was in the Smallville fight. And that was to show that was because at that point, like, the army was shooting at everyone. But once he goes and catches the one guy, that's when the military knows, okay, Superman's our friend.
Yeah, this man is not our enemy. Yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't saving. Like, that's not even a civilian, right? That guy was a military guy who was literally shooting indiscriminately at all of the Kryptonians, Superman included. So that was, that wasn't like, oh, care for civilians. That was Superman showing, no, I'm your friend. That wasn't trying to prevent collateral damage.
Well, but he is fighting General Zod and just trying to like hold him back and stop him. Like, I don't think it would make sense in a fight like that to like show Superman and go and save the cat out of a tree or whatever. Like,
I'm not saying save the cat out of the tree. I'm just saying have more than a token effort to get Zod away from the city.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do agree that like it would have been nice to have actually fucking seen him try harder or like make it clear. Well, like for example, there's a scene where Zod throws a whole truck at a building, and Superman just jumps to the side, and then the truck destroys the entire building. And wasn't that the LexCorp truck, the tank, the oil tanker? Yeah, probably. You see Superman look back at it.
That's a fucking bomb.
There isn't like a close-up shot of Superman realizing I should have caught that.
Uh-huh.
There could have been, yeah.
Yeah.
That is his first time like being a superhero. Like day one, you have to fight aliens that are as powerful as you.
And it's okay if he makes mistakes, but there should be acknowledgement that he's made mistakes.
Yes, I agree with that.
Or show him try to prevent the damage, even if he doesn't succeed. Like, I am okay with them fucking up half of Metropolis. Like, that was a lot of damage, and I'm okay with them doing that in the movie. I'm just not okay with how Superman just didn't seem to try and stop it.
My biggest problem with that movie, actually, I'm actually a way bigger fan of Batman v Superman and Justice League than Man of Steel. I do like Man of Steel. Bigger problem with that is just the tonal shift from him snapping Zod's neck to the immediate like next scene, which is him like it's kind of light. The immediately afterwards, where the chick goes like, "Oh, he's kind of hot." Like,
oh yeah, that scene was kind of out of nowhere.
Like, if you're gonna do a joke like that, maybe give it a little bit more room, because he did just kill the only other person of his kind. He just snapped his neck. So following that up with that scene is a bit short-sighted.
I really think my favorite fight scene in that movie, though, has to be Feora versus the military in Smallville. The way she just completely tears through them, like, ruthlessly. Like, I was just like, this is the kind of, this shows, you know, the Kryptonian power, and it's something that like I felt like hadn't ever been adequately portrayed in film before. Like, I love their punches. I love the way that you got like compression waves, because their fists are moving so fast. There's a lot of visual details in those movies that I really like, and like the way Feora basically just like moves with like, you know, military precision from like one target to the next target to the next, just like slam, 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 killing those guys. That was awesome. And I really think Man of Steel gave me the kind of Superman action that I felt that the other movies had been missing. I just don't think that it gave me the Superman who cares first and foremost about the people of Earth.
The best thing about that scene is she moves so fast that you only see her hitting people. You don't even see her draw her fist back.
Like, yeah, no, she's moving as fast as a Kryptonian would. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is that whole, like, almost like villain monologue that they gave Feora, where she says, like,
that one was silly, where she's like, yeah, she's like,
this is your biggest weakness. You care about people, and we don't, and that's why we're gonna win, because we don't have any moral scruples about what we do, basically.
Yeah, well, what she said was that, like, you have compassion and we do not, which gives us an evolutionary advantage. And I'm just sitting here like, bitch, your entire planet blew up. What do you mean it gives you an evolutionary advantage? Humans are doing a lot better than you are right now.
Oh, Zod's meant to be basically a white supremacist, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's a eugenicist.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that, you know, Clark was the fact that Clark was born from natural methods rather than being grown like a Matrix baby, like Zod called that heresy.
It's like he's like a fucking Warhammer character. Like he's just obsessed with supremacy essentially, and he believes that Krypton, the reason Krypton fell, just because like the bloodlines were degenerate, he had to start again from scratch. He's like the most obvious like parallel for like a colonialist supremacist, basically.
Can we talk about how stupid his plot was too? Because like, it's shown in this movie that it's not just the red sun, or sorry, it's not just Krypton's red sun that didn't give them their powers. It's not just the yellow sun that gives them their powers. It was also the atmosphere, because when Clark goes on to Zod's ship, he becomes as weak as they are, even though he should still have the yellow sun radiation absorbed into his body. So it's clear that there's like an atmospheric component that does it too. And so what does Zod do with this planet where he can go in there and behave as a god? He wants to terraform it to become more like Krypton so that he can just be, what, like as weak as a human?
Oh, Zod...
That plot line made no sense to me.
This version of Zod isn't like, what was that actor's name?
Terrence Stamp?
Yeah, he's not like that. Like, he's almost completely different, essentially, because he doesn't care about having powers, like superpowers. He just wants to restore Krypton. He probably doesn't even like this change, that he has powers now. He's going to use it as best as he can, while he can, to combat Superman, obviously. But I don't know why he would like that, because he just wants to return to tradition, essentially. He doesn't want, like, superpowers.
I mean, as fascist coded as he is, I think superpowers would be exactly the kind of thing that he would want, you know?
Wouldn't be useful, because everyone would be dead, and everyone would have superpowers. And then how would he oppress everyone if they all had the same powers as him?
I guess that might... Okay, there we are. That's a fair...
He wouldn't want everyone to be like on the same playing field. He would prefer having his military might and having everyone just be Kryptonians again, like on Krypton. Now he's the ruler. He already has what he wants, which is him basically starting society from scratch, and him is number one.
Alright. Well, I think you've got... Do you have any more thoughts on this, or because it feels like we're kind of winding down here?
Well, we started to talk a lot about Man of Steel, but we never really got to. Did you like the Snyder Cut? Did you enjoy it at all?
I thought it was better than Justice League, but that's because Justice League was a hacked together mess. And also Joss Whedon's a piece of shit. But I thought it was a little overlong and indulgent.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly. I mean, by design, it's indulgent, right?
Yeah, Zack Snyder is an indulgent filmmaker, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but 4 hours, it didn't need to be 4 hours. There was a lot of stuff that you could have cut. I get the feeling like even if Zack Snyder had been able to wrest more creative control for the theatrical version of it, that even then, like, he wouldn't have gotten a 4-hour movie. Like, he went with that length because they were like, okay, we're gonna give you this money. Everybody's been clamoring for the Snyder Cut, so here you go, here's the Snyder Cut. And he's like, okay, we're doing the Snyder Cut. Well, I want it to be 4 hours. It's gonna be on streaming, so you don't have to worry about taking up, a screen for too long on a single ticket sale. And they just, indulged him because, they were giving him what the fans wanted, right?
I don't know. I feel like they used that time really well. Like, there was always something
Did they?
happening.
I mean,
you mentioned the like Norwegian singing and stuff, right? But all
yeah,
of this
there's
stuff
no reason
is
for that
about-
scene. Is
Sets
that
tone?
what's the tone that it sets?
Well,
That they
reminds
pulled.
you-
Go ahead.
It reminds you that they're like mythic figures, right? Like they see Aquaman basically as like a god. That's kind of so it has to have that sense of scale. So I think long scenes like that, even though they are clearly very self-indulgent, they are saying something. It's not like they're just saying nothing. They do bring you into the tone. Like, not everything has to be plot. Some things can just be there to pull you into the world of the story.
Does Arthur Curry strike you as the kind of character who would be totally down with people singing, long, like, hymns about him? Like, he seems like a very kind of irreverent guy himself. He wants nothing to do with Atlantis. And he kind of begrudgingly saves people. Like when he rescues that one guy from the storm, he's like, he didn't respect the storm. Then he takes the whole like bottle of whiskey. He's like, this one's on him. Like he's not there for the worship, and it really feels like he wouldn't want to be worshipped.
Doesn't matter what he wants. That's how people view him. The same with Superman, right? Like.
Yeah,
Man
but
does
like,
not wanna be
but this
worshipped.
this isn't like that though, because it's not like he was, just helping people and then going away. Like he's there in the bar with them all. Like they know who he is. That's why they're like, suspicious of Bruce Wayne, because they want to, protect him. So like, if they're in a situation where like they know who he is, surely they should have gotten a read by now that, if his kind of personality, right?
Well, but they clearly revere him because they're standing there and like that chick like sniffs his sweater and stuff like that. So they're clearly like waiting for him to return and bring them more fish or whatever.
Well, yeah.
This is like a almost like a tradition. Like this guy comes and brings us fish. I don't really know what the read is of that scene, honestly, because it's.
I kind of feel like it's a little weird to have an Icelandic community that doesn't know how to fish.
Yeah,
like that seems a little weird. Like, oh, the weather's bad, so they need Aquaman to bring them food. No, Iceland's weather has always been Iceland's weather. They know how to survive out there.
This is just like meaningless plot shit. Like this doesn't matter to me. I'm talking about tone and setting a tone and creating a world. Like the scene where like Lois goes to visit Clark's not his gravestone, I guess, just the destroyed monument.
Yeah.
And there was that Leonard Cohen song played. No, was it Leonard Cohen?
It might have been. I know Zack Snyder really likes Leonard Cohen.
No, sorry. No, sorry. It wasn't Leonard Cohen. It was Distant Sky. That's the name of the song. Nick Cave. That's the one. Okay. Like that scene was just meant to bring you into the world. They could have cut it out. There's heaps of scenes that you could cut out of the movie.
Yes, I agree. There's heaps of scenes that you could cut out.
Then, like, where's the art? Like, where's the art of creating a world and making it believable and creating characters and creating tone? You wouldn't have that.
There's a thing called pacing. And
I think the pacing was great.
Having every single idea for a scene and throwing them all in there doesn't mean that it improves the artistic merit of the film. I don't think. Well, yeah, it is very slow pacing, and I don't think that it benefits from it.
I love slow pacing.
I mean, you can have things that are slow paced, but like this one is slow paced because there are superfluous scenes in there. Like, I don't think that it really helps.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they were like superfluous. I think things like that are really great. I wish more movies had like weird scenes that just let you breathe in the world of the movie rather than constantly like telling you what's going on. If I were to choose, like, I would prefer that more movies actually do that kind of stuff.
Well,
this is all aesthetics.
I mean, it's funny though because like if I were to pick something that does more of the letting it breathe, like I would go for like a Netflix or a Disney Plus series, right? Like if you look at like say Daredevil on Netflix, or I guess that was on Disney Plus now, but like that lets it breathe, but that's also, you know, it's a TV show, so you can pace it like a TV show. But looking at the way that like the Snyder Cut is divided up into chapters, those chapters don't really have like their own, like they don't feel like individual episodes that you could, like I don't think if you had cut this up into a series and released it as a series that each episode would feel like an episode, right? It would feel like, okay, that was just part of a movie that you cut together.
Yeah, there was a weird, like, they almost did that, but I'm glad that they didn't. But there was like a weird conversation earlier. They were thinking of releasing like one chapter a week. God, they didn't do that.
I don't think that would have worked. Yeah, but I think his cut was too long. I think there's probably a good, like, and I'm not opposed to having long movies. I've fucking sat through the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings, but that's also like that is a bit of, you know, like a fan indulgence. Like, you don't need to have seen the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings. A lot of that stuff is just extra bits for the fans who really like the movies. I think just the theatrical cuts of those movies are perfectly fine, except for the fact that Saruman is not in Return of the King, unless you watch the extended edition.
I do agree with you. The Snyder Cut is too long. Too long for what purposes, right? Because, like, for the purposes it had to fulfill, it's the perfect length. Because at that point, if you're going to release this, like, weird cult cut of a movie that everyone's clamoring for, you have to go all out and just release whatever you've got, just to shut the fans up, right? I do think, like, for the purposes that it was meant to fulfill, like you said about the extended cuts of Lord of the Rings, which I've watched thousands of times. I fucking love those movies. But those cuts, Peter Jackson knew he couldn't release them in cinema. So he...
Well, I mean, obviously, like, there's the behind the scenes for him filming the extended cut of Return of the King. There's literally a shot that they are filming after they've already won the Oscar for Best Picture. Yeah,
that's the shot of the skulls, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he's like dropping skulls on the floor. Yeah, that was so funny.
And he comments, he's like, I wonder if there's ever been, if this is the first time there's been a movie that's still filming after it's won the Oscar.
Yeah, and I like that about movies. I like that we can be like, okay, here's like the version that we'll release in theaters, but then here's like a different version that has a different purpose. And Peter Jackson said that with the extended cuts, they could be as long as they wanted to, because these would just be, they would sit on your shelf like books, and you could sit down and watch one disc and then get up and go off and then the other disc. Zack Snyder designed this movie in the same way, where you put in
Well,
one
no,
disc.
I actually hard disagree. I think Zack Snyder designs his stories in a way that if you have to cut them down so that they fit for a theatrical run, you miss things. That was the problem with Batman versus Superman. I think the ultimate cut is like that's the only way that to watch the movie, because otherwise Lex Luthor's plot doesn't fucking make sense. So
I'm not saying he designed. Sorry, I'm not saying he like perfectly designed the theatrical cuts to serve a purpose, and then perfectly designed the extended cuts to serve a purpose. I'm saying in the specific case of the Snyder Cut, he designed that not to be viewed like a theatrical film, and it was clearly meant to be an indulgence for the fans that you sit down and you watch one disc at a time. So in that like very specific circumstance, it's totally understandable that movie has really long, weird scenes.
Sure, but the unfortunate reality then is that that's the only version, like, quote unquote, worth seeing, because Justice League is such a hacked together mess. Like, nobody likes that one.
That's Warner Brothers' fault. Zack Snyder would have released. He already had a edit that was much shorter. He would have released, but it never saw the light of day. And then when it came to releasing the Snyder Cut, he made a new edit that was longer.
Yeah,
that's not on him. They could have had a pretty decent 2.5-hour movie, but they decided against it and sort of reshot scenes and made like a 2-hour movie that was exactly 2 hours. For some reason, they had that mandate come in at some point. That mandate came in after he was already done shooting the movie. That's why they had to get Joss Whedon to reshoot scenes and like change.
That's what I wondered, because like I was just like, if he knew that he was only getting a 2-hour movie, why would he make the movie this way? Like, it very clearly is not at all written to be a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, and the writer Chris Terrio tried to get his name taken off the movie because he was so shocked by just how different it was.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
The script he had written, which was, I imagine that script would have been like a fucking holy Bible. Like that thing must have been huge. But they refused to take his name off the movie because they'd already like had it like printed or whatever. Like it was already in theaters at that point.
Well, there are like WGA rules for for writers credit, and there's like a whole arbitration process if you want your name removed from it, where they go through and they're like, okay, well, this has been so changed from what you wrote that you don't get the credit for that anymore. But if he did go through an arbitration process on that, they would have determined this still resembles enough what you wrote that we can't have your name taken off it anymore.
Yeah, I think in some cases, like, can take your name off if they want to. Like, I think in some cases, if you ask, like, they'll like respect your wishes and remove your name, because like, doesn't like Alan Moore not have his name on like anything?
Oh yeah, Alan Moore. His name is removed from credits for any adaptations of his stuff. They only ever credit the artist. Like, what was it? Dave Gibbons was the artist for Watchmen. Yeah, he's the only one credited for Watchmen adaptations.
And I just wanted to.
But also, Alan
Chris
Moore
Terrio.
is that's like a different thing though, because like obviously Alan Moore does not want credit for something that he has nothing to do with. He has nothing to do with any of those adaptations. Whereas Chris Terrio, who did write the movie, there's
he wrote
guild
the
rules
movie.
about.
Then,
there's guild rules about crediting and stuff like that have to be have to be dealt with, and those rules aren't perfect. Obviously.
I wanted to mention Chris Terrio just because, like, listen, everyone who hates Zack Snyder, who you actually hate is probably Chris Terrio. Probably the writer is the one who deserves your ire.
And I just got a $50 dono, holy shit, from I'm a Cockzucker that says, can you guys talk about the fact that Henry Cavill is a closet case? What do you mean by that, closet case?
Gay?
Gay? I mean, maybe. Is he gay?
I've heard like rumors and stuff, but that was mostly like spread by Grace Randolph.
Oh, isn't she like the wasn't she one of the people that like Zack Snyder like explicitly called out? It was like you're an idiot and you keep saying lies.
Can't remember, but she's the one that opens every video with well. Like people make memes of it. She starts every video with some like weird. Well, there's a weird way of speaking. Anyway, yeah, she I don't know if it's true, but she talks about it a lot.
Well, speaking as a bi man myself, I would not be opposed to that beautiful man, liking the D.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me? I would switch teams immediately. She hates Jessica Chastain with burning passion. Yeah, like I don't know why. She really doesn't like Jessica Chastain. I don't know what it is. It's a whole meme.
I'm just thinking of there was a story, it was either when BVS or Man of Steel was coming out, but there was like a promo display for the movie at Times Square, and Henry Cavill had gone there wearing glasses to see if anybody would recognize him, and they didn't. It was like he was proving the whole, Clark Kent, nobody recognizes that Clark Kent is Superman because he's got the glasses on. Nobody recognized him.
I think it's even funnier than you're remembering. I think he didn't have glasses at all, and he had a Superman t-shirt. Like, he took the glasses off or whatever, and then he just stood there with a Superman t-shirt.
And people still didn't recognize it? Well, it's also, like, Henry Cavill was, like, when he did Man of Steel and then, like, Batman vs. Superman, he hadn't really done much else. And, like, honestly, after Man of Steel came out, and I hadn't seen it for a couple years, and then Batman vs. Superman came out, I think when I read that story, I'm like, well, I'm trying to think, can I make a clear picture in my head of what Henry Cavill looks like that isn't just, a generic, handsome Hollywood man? Because, like, I'm not exactly, like, on the lookout for Superman at Times Square, so maybe it's just that kind of a thing. Nobody sees Clark as Superman because nobody's looking to see Clark as Superman.
It also helps that Henry Cavill just looks like Superman. So when I try to remember what Henry Cavill looks like, I just see a fucking drawing. Like he looks so much like Superman that it's weird.
Somebody give him the spit curl though. He needs a spit curl.
Yeah. The director of Birds of Prey ripped Grace a new one for spreading fake crap. Yeah, that's right. It was the director of Birds of Prey. She said some like really mean stuff to Grace Randolph and loaded over it. That was a while ago.
Yeah, I feel like there was somebody that James Gunn was like ripping a new one too.
Oh yeah, James Gunn's always making fun of those people too. That's starting to happen, by the way. I like that, like, people who make movies can actually buy it back a little bit. Instead of just completely ignoring the crazy fandoms out there. Like, I wish someone would like a new director would just shit on Geeks and Gamers and The Quartering, like, every day. That'd be great.
That would be great. I know Zack Snyder disavowed Geeks and Gamers, and they were real butthurt about that. They're like, how could Zack Snyder betray us like this? It's like, well, stop being Nazis.
I love that too, because I'm pretty sure, like, Geeks and Gamers, was it The Quartering or was it Geeks and Gamers? They're all the same. They're all the fucking same. But I'm pretty sure they're, like, huge fans of Zack Snyder, because everyone, reactionary and right-wing, really likes Zack Snyder's, like, style, I guess, because he's, like, has, like, strong men in his movies. And
yeah,
has, like,
his style fits very well with the fascist aesthetic, so I can understand why he's got a lot of right-wing fans.
But I also feel like a lot of leftists buy into kind of drink the punch really easily on that and think, oh, being a Zack Snyder fan means you have to be an evil racist. And it's like,
oh yeah, no, there's
no.
definitely that. I mean, like, it was, there's a fact that I put lefty Snyderbro in my title because that's not what people expect. And I also thought it would make for an interesting conversation. Also because, like, I'm not an anti-Snyder person myself. I think there's a lot of, as we've been here, I think there's a lot of things that he just doesn't understand or doesn't care to put the work into portraying. I think, like you say, he's a visual storyteller, and I agree with that. He has his idea of remaking those cool splash pages from comics that he read as a kid.
And I think he's very not immature. I wouldn't call him immature, but he's very what's the word?
He's kind of a himbo.
Yeah. He's a himbo a little bit. He likes the magic and the wonder of filmmaking and cinema, right?
Yeah.
And he sort of, I think that makes him like a really easy target to be like, oh yeah, must be just a completely ignorant like piece of shit then.
Yeah, no, I've always got the impression that he's a cool dude. I think he's probably just politically pretty incurious, and he doesn't really think about the implications of some of the whole. And like, I know when we were talking, you said you really didn't want to get into Watchmen itself specifically, because you wanted to focus more on the on the Snyderverse with the DC stuff. But like, the ways that he portrayed particularly the comedian and Rorschach in Watchmen, where they're both portrayed as like these hardened, cool dudes, even though textually the comedian's horrible. But you cast Jeffrey Dean Morgan and he plays him like the cool Jeffrey Dean Morgan type of a character. And then with Rorschach, there's like a scene where it's a scene where textually it's ripped straight from the pages, where he's being given the inkblot tests in the psychiatric prison, and the way that Jackie Earle Haley plays that is like he's being very sarcastic with all of the responses and trying to maintain that whole bravado. Whereas if you look at the art in the comic for that scene, he is a completely broken man without his mask. Without his mask, he feels naked. He feels like he's not a person. And he just kind of shuts down and just has like the very flat expressions on his face. And like, that wasn't captured in that film at all. And then the whole scene where, he throws the hot oil on the guy and then goes, "You don't understand, I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me." Like, that's portrayed as like a badass boast and not like the psycho fucking, like the insane psycho that he is.
Always saying this. Every day on
What?
Twitter, I'm saying this.
What's up?
We're all trapped in here with me. That's what I say every day, every time I log on. I haven't watched the Watchmen movie. Have you seen the TV show, by the way?
Yes, I actually quite liked the TV show.
Oh my god, wasn't it really fucking good? Like,
yeah, I thought it was great.
Wow. Yeah, like that was really good. I've watched that more recently. I haven't watched the movie in a while. I remember just I don't get the criticism because my like whole recollection, I feel like that movie is as close as you can get to a page-for-page recreation of the comic. At least the Ultimate Cut, which was the last one I watched.
Textually, if you are looking at it from the screenplay itself and like the events that happen, yes. Other than change, apart from changing the squid to Dr. Manhattan, which I don't mind that change.
Someone in the comments was like, "I will never forgive him for getting rid of the squid."
That doesn't bug me at all. I always thought the squid was weird. But it's not just the fact that like he has the events take place. It's what the camera chooses to linger on. It's how things are portrayed in the scenes. Like I said, textually, yes, it's a faithful adaptation. But it's how Zack Snyder chooses to portray those scenes. where he shows the action as cool and like slow-mo, it was like the fight scene where they're breaking Rorschach out of prison was shot basically the same way that he would shoot fight scenes in 300. And that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit Watchmen at all, because Watchmen isn't about how, oh, look at all the cool action that the superheroes are doing. No, they should have been portrayed as like junkies getting a fix because they're going out and beating people up like the old days, like they used to. And it should have been portrayed as the shitty thing that it is, which is they're breaking into a prison to help a psychopathic murderer escape, But it's just portrayed in the film as like a cool thing.
Yeah, I gotta rewatch it. I don't own it on Blu-ray. Interesting. I do think, even though he does, I know what scene you're talking about. Like, it goes all slow-mo, and they're just like kicking ass in the most like extraordinary way. Like, basically, they're almost somehow, even though they don't have powers because of Snyder's style, it's like they have powers. Like, they're just fucking destroying these people. They're moving like really fast, and it's slow-mo and it's stylized. But I do like that, at least, if I remember correctly, he does really focus on the violence as well. Like, he doesn't shy away from the violence. He shows them like the bones coming out of people's arms as they're like getting destroyed.
Yes, but it's never portrayed as a bad thing that they're doing that. It's portrayed as a cool thing that they're doing that.
Do you think
which is kind of like it's a total tonal mismatch from the source material, where Alan Moore is like, superheroes are bad actually.
It's tough because comic books are a power fantasy. So it is hard to criticize comic books for their power fantasy tendencies while also being that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well,
you're enjoying the violence, but also you are critiquing the violence in a sense.
Well, I think that's why Zack Snyder was the wrong person to direct it, because Zack Snyder enjoys the film violence, and it should have been shot by somebody who wanted to show the violence not as cool or something to enjoy, as something that you kind of recoil from. Because, like, that's really how it should have been. It shouldn't be, all of these people were bad people.
Yeah, I do remember, again, I haven't seen it in a while, but I do remember recoiling. Like, when he shows the bone coming out of the arm and, like, the blood basically, like, splatters all over the camera. Well, I don't know if it splatters on the camera, but blood's, like, flying towards you, and the cool music is playing. I do think there is an intent there. I don't think Snyder's completely ignorant when it comes to the fact that this is bad. Like, there is intent that he's trying to say that these people are fucked in the head, but also isn't violence fun? And I think he's doing both at the same time, which
I think he's only doing isn't violence fun.
Alright, well, again, I'll have to rewatch that movie. But
it has been a couple years since I've seen that movie too, but yeah,
Yeah. I do think he is trying to say, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, which is problematic.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of the point of comic books, in that you criticize, and this is the case with Superman movies, you criticize the power while also reveling in the power fantasy. It's kind of this weird thing where you're doing both at the same time. But
in order to do both at the same time, I think it takes a more delicate filmmaker than Zack Snyder is. I don't think Zack Snyder is the man to do that.
Okay, interesting. I totally see where you're coming from. Definitely with the Watchmen thing, but Watchmen is such a difficult thing to fucking adapt. Like,
yeah, like people were saying for a long time that it's not adaptable, and like, the TV show was like, we're not adapting the comic, we're just making a sequel to the comic.
Yeah.
And like, I think if you had given that same script to a different director, I think you would have had a better result.
I don't think he shied away from showing the impact of violence and like how dark these characters were.
Of course he doesn't shy away from the impact. The problem is that he treats it as cool. Which, like, if you want to, well, in their minds,
you're in the minds of the characters right now. You're not viewing them as like this outside spectator. You're always in a character's head when you're telling a story.
I don't necessarily agree. There are different ways that you can have points of view in story. And you can have, you know, your subjective first-person perspective, but you also have, like, the omniscient narrator. There's multiple ways to have perspectives in stories. And I think that there was a much better way to portray the violence of what they were doing. And I think when you just say, well, you're just in their head, honestly, I think you're giving Zack Snyder too much credit there. I don't think Zack Snyder was really thinking at all about how the intent of the story was to more heavily criticize superheroes, because I don't think Zack Snyder criticizes superheroes. I think he likes the superheroes who are edgy and dark, and I think that's what his read on The Watchmen was, not the deeper critique of, you know, vigilantism itself that Watchmen is.
I think Zack Snyder absolutely criticizes superheroes. He got in trouble for saying some stuff in an interview. He complained about superheroes. Hey? I'm gonna look this up.
Sure, yeah, let's see what he
But
said.
there's a quote that, like, people have been, like, using to bash him. Oh god, this is gonna take so long to find. Second. Alright. Government right to... if someone in the chat could find it, that'd be great. But, like,
well,
he basically says,
unless
like,
unless they are modded in chat, they can't post links. So
he basically says, like, he talks about superheroes as if they are political figures, and he says, like, comic books are a fantasy. Like, it's a fucking fantasy. Like, you believe your government didn't lie to you. He basically said a bunch of, like, stuff like that, like, in a really edgy way. Basically talked about how, like, your superheroes are kind of like that. Like, they are a sort of idealization needs to be broken down. That's kind of what he was saying. I do think he's aware of that. I don't know if he was aware of that when he made Watchmen, though, because I'm pretty sure he made these comments after Watchmen. Again, I'm not defending Watchmen. Now I'm just, like, focusing on his other stuff. I do think he's aware of, like, the problematic nature of superheroes and their power fantasies, essentially.
yeah, even if he's aware, I don't think he has the delicate touch to handle that himself. I don't think he is very good at handling the kind of deconstruction that that something like Watchmen was.
Wake the fuck up. It's the wake the fuck up quote. He said to comic book fans, "Wake the fuck up, you're living in a fantasy." That's the quote. I wish I could find the full thing. Yeah, like, people dragged him for saying that, but I don't know, it's kind of based. Like,
I'm not familiar with the quote, so I'd need to hear more of it than just wake the fuck up, you're living in a fantasy.
Found something that's linking to something.
Yeah, that's how the internet is.
Alright, I'm gonna read the quote. It's probably really stupid, but I'm gonna read it anyway.
Alright, let's hear it.
So this is the quote. Once you've lost your virginity to this fucking movie, and then you come and say to me something about, like, my superhero wouldn't do that. I'm like, are you serious? I'm, like, down the fucking road on that. It's cool to view it and be like, my heroes are still innocent. My heroes didn't fucking lie to America. Heroes didn't embezzle money from their corporations. My heroes didn't commit any atrocities. That's cool, but you're living in a fucking dream world. And then he says, like, wake the fuck up. So, like, I think you're being not generous enough when you say, like, he's not aware. I think he is aware, and he is trying to tell people to sort of wake up and, like, look at how problematic these characters are. And I think the violence in Watchmen, as much as the music is saying it's cool, it's only saying that because there are different perspectives. And he's trying to put you in the perspective of these characters. But, like, he's also, like, you can do multiple lenses of analysis. Like, you can view characters in different ways.
Yeah, just because he's aware of these things doesn't mean he's skilled at portraying them, is what I guess I would say.
Fair enough.
I think he's really good at doing action. I don't think he's really good at doing analysis. And yeah, like, you can have the understanding of, you know, like, honestly, that does sound like kind of a base quote from him. Do you have a date on that when that came out? Because I imagine that was after Watchmen, right? Because that sounds like a response to criticism that he got for, like, the DC movies.
It looks like it's a response to Batman v Superman.
Yeah,
and
okay,
people
that makes
saying,
sense.
Batman doesn't kill, and he's like, yes, he does. Like, he has killed in the past and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would just say that in that regard, like, if you're going to say, yes, of course Batman has killed, well, yes, it's true. Batman has killed in the comics. But that's, you in stories where you have Batman kill in the comics, you are acutely aware of his no-kill code. But the Batman in Snyder's movies doesn't have a no-kill code. So that's not even addressed.
They could have made it clearer.
Yes, they could have made it clear.
They could have made it
clearer.
Like I
said, I am not opposed to a story in which Batman kills. I think that is a very interesting story to tell.
Yeah. And he kills a lot in, even though, like, I don't think Zack is trying to say the same thing as Dark Knight Returns. Again, he does kill in the Dark Knight Returns. Yeah. But whenever he does kill, it's not really addressed. It just kind of happens. And then Batman doesn't address it. Like, it's kind of weird.
In the Dark Knight Returns?
Like Batman doesn't talk that much about how he kills people, and even when he does finally kill, because, you know, he, like, breaks the Joker's neck, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But he doesn't break the neck all the way.
He specifically says, "I've got to kill this guy."
But
like he textually says it. He says that this guy is somebody that I need to kill now. Like it is explicitly addressed in that story.
But Batman, you've already killed people in this comic. Like, he's already killed people, and he just didn't acknowledge when he did it. I mean, like, it's like this weird blind spot that he has. Because do you remember when he says, the guy's like, I'll kill her, and then it's like, I believe you, right? And they took that straight from Dark Knight Returns and put it in Batman v Superman, right?
It's been a long time since I read Dark Knight Returns, so you probably know more about that than I do. God, I think I only read that book once, and like 20 years ago, so I just remember specifically killing Joker.
I've got the page up right here in front of me. So, basically, just to sum it up, he's pointing a gun. Another guy's pointing a gun. Batman's pointing the gun at this guy. The guy goes, I'm gonna kill this kid. Batman says, I believe you. He pulls the trigger. He actually shoots the guy directly. Like, he directly kills someone by shooting them with a gun. And then, in the panel where the person dies, grayed out. So you don't see the red, you don't see the violence, you just see lines and gray. Right? And that's meant to be Batman's perspective. Like, he doesn't see the violence he just committed. And then later on in the comic, when he goes like, I can't let the Joker go on anymore, like, I have to stop him, I have to do this. And he breaks the Joker's neck, but he only paralyzes him. And Joker laughs at him, and then Joker breaks his neck. Like, he kind of does, it doesn't really make sense, but Joker's neck is like half broken or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Joker like breaks his own neck. Try and like frame Batman. Then Joker's text, like the word bubbles are all grayed out. So it's kind of like Batman can't accept that he already kills people. It's a blind spot that he actually has. So I think Batman v Superman is kind of building on that idea. But Batman, he does kill people, but he never really does it directly, and he never really thinks about it. It's just collateral to him. You know, like, that guy was in my way. I'm gonna flip a car, and it's gonna land on him. And if he dies, fuck it. He shouldn't have been in my way. But Superman is the first person that he's about to directly kill. Like, he's holding the spear. He's gonna plunge it into their chest. It's as direct as it can get. And Batman tries to make sure it's direct. He designs that spear like a holy weapon, like a holy lance, like a demon slaying an angel, because he has to personalize it in that way, or else he can't make sense of it. He wouldn't be able to kill Superman with a gun, but he would be able to kill Superman with a spear. You know, so it's like a part of his psychology.
Yeah. Again, I think there's a lot of reads that you have that I don't in there, and I don't know how much of it is just more direct engaging with the films. You've probably seen them more times than I have, and how much of it is wanting something to be there.
I would recommend what was that guy's name? Shit, now I can't remember. Twin Imperfect? A YouTuber. He made like a really simple like deconstruction of the story and like the movie and stuff like that. He basically makes a lot of the points that I'm making here. Like, this is the stuff that I sort of saw in the movie. I think a lot of Snyder fans don't really get out of the movie what I get. I think I'm the only correct Snyder fan, basically, is what I'm saying. No. I do think that, like, a lot of the critique of Zack Snyder is maybe just misdirected, and it's actually critique that should be levied at his fans, I think.
I mean, I definitely see more people critiquing Snyderbros than I see critiquing Snyder. I think probably the most critique that I see of Snyder is that people are like, he's just not as deep as his fans think he is.
I don't think he's that deep. I think he's a very simple visual storyteller. I think his movies if anyone's deep, I guess it would be Chris Terrio, because he's the guy who, like, really loves, like, really layered mythology. He's the guy who wrote Argo. That movie?
Wrote what?
Argo. It was
I don't know.
He won an Oscar for it.
Oh, Argo.
Like
Sorry, yeah.
Argo.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I liked Argo.
Well, Chris Terrio, I think he's a great writer, and a lot of the problems that people have with Batman v Superman and Snyder Cut, ain't his fault, because he really likes mythology, I guess. He wrote The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, that's not good. That's not. I wouldn't put that on my. If I were to get my name removed from, you know, a movie, it would be fucking that one. Jesus Christ, that movie was awful.
So by the way, if you ever want to have another talk about movies, we could totally talk about that movie, because I love that movie.
You love? Oh, that would be an interesting conversation then, because you're the one person in the world who likes that movie.
It's just me.
It's just
so
you. That would be
here.
interesting.
Yeah, although that movie does have problems, but we won't talk about that now. But like, yeah, like I'm a big fan of Chris Terrio and his style of writing, but it's very inside, like, baseball, like very mythic and referential. Like fucking The Rise of Skywalker. It's like, you can't watch that movie unless you've seen all the other Star Wars movies, because it's just completely. It's like an Ouroboros. It's like a snake eating itself. Like,
well, I don't have a problem with making, like, the last movie of, like, 3 trilogies, you know, something that you should have seen the other movies for first, but that doesn't make it a good movie.
Yeah. But, you know, like, it's mainly Chris Terrier's fault, is what I'm saying. So all of you people who hate Zack Snyder, listen. Zack Snyder's a good director. He just had someone writing for him that you might not like. That would be my closing statement.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me. If you want to shout yourself out to everyone, And then I can just go back to playing video games.
Right. What the fuck is my Twitter at again? Can't even remember. Punish Jake 2.
Oh, it's Punish Jake 2, yeah.
Yeah, there it is. I had another one. Presumably Punish Jake 1. Yeah, that's...
Well,
that's
presumably
I don't
something
really...
before the Punished one as well.
Yeah, well, when I got suspended, that's when I became punished, of course. So it was just Jake. Yeah, thank you for listening to my insane rambles. I hope that even if you don't like these movies very much, you can at least see sort of where I'm coming from when I say, like, hey, these movies are pretty good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for watching. I'm trying to get my channel monetized, so your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. I stream every Monday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a special shout out to Piftle Cakes and Ryan D. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.